The Barbarian species. The Galactic Council chamber floated in silent orbit around the white star of Alindra Prime, a structure so vast that entire cities could have rested within its walls. Hundreds of species from across the galaxy gathered there, each civilization older and more advanced than the last. Some had walked among the stars for 1,000,000 years. Others had long since abandoned physical bodies, existing as pure energy or consciousness. To them, the universe was a solved puzzle. There were few mysteries left, except one: humanity. On the central platform, a projection of Earth rotated slowly in the air. Blue oceans, swirling clouds, and the bright glow of cities across its surface. The newest interstellar species in the galaxy had been under observation since their first warp-capable vessel entered deep space nearly 2 centuries ago. A tall, crystalline being from the T'Charwyl collective spoke first, its voice resonating like chimes through the chamber. Subject designation: humanity. Planet of origin: Earth. Estimated technological maturity: early interstellar. Another council member, an ancient insectoid diplomat from the Karth Dominion, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Behavioral analysis confirms previous assessments. The species demonstrates extreme emotional volatility, frequent internal conflict, and a tendency toward violent competition. Across the chamber, murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered representatives. A floating intelligence from the Vayari continuum pulsed with faint blue light as it added its conclusion. They have achieved faster-than-light travel in only 200 of their planetary years. However, their development shows no signs of cultural stabilization. Wars continue. Political divisions persist. Their societies remain chaotic. The chamber dimmed slightly as the final report appeared in the air. Humanity: unstable, primitive, dangerous. A pause followed. Then the insectoid Karth diplomat spoke the word that would echo across the council records for centuries. Barbarians. The label spread quickly among the member civilizations. It became the simplest way to describe the strange new species from the distant spiral arm of the galaxy. Humans were brilliant but reckless, creative but unpredictable, capable of art, music, and scientific discovery, but also endless conflict. To the ancient species of the Galactic Council, humanity seemed like a civilization that had somehow stumbled into the stars before it was truly ready. And so, humanity was tolerated, but never respected. 200 light-years away, the human exploration vessel Odyssey Horizon drifted silently through the graveyard of a dead star system. The star itself had collapsed into a cold white dwarf billions of years earlier, leaving behind a silent system of frozen planets and drifting asteroid belts. To most civilizations, the system held no value. But human deep-scan satellites had detected something strange: artificial geometry. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display in front of her. A massive structure floated within the asteroid field, dark and ancient, its surface covered in patterns that no known database could identify. "How old is it?" she asked. The ship's science officer, Dr. Marcus Chun, shook his head slowly. "We're still calculating, but initial estimates suggest billions of years." The bridge fell silent. Billions. That meant the structure had been built long before any currently known civilization had existed. Chun magnified the scan, revealing towering monolithic pillars connected by enormous rings. Symbols carved across the surfaces glowed faintly under the ship's sensors. "Captain," Chun said quietly, "this might be architect technology." The name alone carried enormous weight. Across the galaxy, archaeologists had discovered scattered remnants of a mysterious precursor civilization, an ancient race known only as the first architects. They were believed to have existed billions of years ago before vanishing completely. All that remained were fragments of their creations. Megastructures, machines beyond comprehension, and a language no species had ever managed to decode. Entire scientific institutes across the galaxy had spent millennia trying to understand those symbols. None had succeeded. Captain Vasquez exhaled slowly. "Well," she said, "looks like we're about to make some history." News of the discovery reached the Galactic Council within hours. Predictably, most council members found the situation amusing. The humans, those chaotic newcomers, had discovered one of the most mysterious artifacts in the galaxy. Naturally, the council demanded access. A joint research mission was organized, with alien scientists observing as human researchers began studying the monolith network. Inside the central chamber of the ancient structure, towering walls were covered with glowing symbols. The patterns flowed across the surface like living equations. Alien linguists examined the text with advanced analysis systems. Nothing made sense. The language wasn't purely mathematical. It wasn't symbolic logic either. Every attempt to decode it failed the same way it had for millions of years, until the humans began studying it. Dr. Marcus Chun stood in front of the massive wall of symbols, tilting his head slightly as he studied the shifting patterns. "Do you see it?" he asked. One of the alien observers, a Vayari intelligence construct, pulsed with confusion. "Clarify." Chun gestured toward the symbols. "They're not just equations," he said. "They're layered." "Layered?" The construct repeated. "Yeah, it's like language mixed with math, but also metaphor." He tapped a section of the glowing script. "This part looks like a mathematical relationship, but the structure is arranged almost like poetry." The alien observers fell silent. Poetry? No advanced civilization structured computational language like that. Yet the human team continued studying the symbols. And, slowly, patterns began to emerge. Human linguists combined logic with instinct. They compared the symbols not only to mathematics, but to music, storytelling, and human linguistic structures. Days passed, then weeks. Finally, one evening inside the monolith chamber, Dr. Chin stepped forward with a translation attempt. "I think I've got the first phrase," he said. The alien observers watched with mild curiosity. After all, every species that had tried this before had failed. Chin hesitated for a moment, then spoke the sequence aloud. The chamber shook. Ancient lights flickered to life across the walls. Deep within the structure, mechanisms older than stars began to awaken. Across the galaxy, dormant architect systems registered the signal. And in the Galactic Council chamber, alarm systems suddenly began to scream. Because for the first time in billions of years, someone had spoken the language of the gods. The language awakens. The moment Dr. Marcus Chin finished speaking the strange phrase, the ancient chamber came alive. For billions of years, the monolith network had remained silent, an inert relic from a civilization so old that even the oldest species in the Galactic Council barely understood its history. Entire scientific institutions had dedicated centuries to studying architect artifacts. None had ever responded. Until now, a deep vibration rolled through the structure like the awakening of something colossal. The glowing symbols across the wall shifted, rearranging themselves in flowing patterns that moved like living equations. Lights ignited along the towering pillars, illuminating the massive chamber with a cold blue glow. Dr. Chun took a cautious step back. "I didn't expect that," he admitted. Behind him, the alien observers reacted far less calmly. The Vayari intelligence construct pulsed violently with flashing signals as it transmitted urgent alerts to the Galactic Council. "This is impossible," the construct declared. "Architect systems have never responded to organic vocalization." Captain Elena Vasquez, standing near the chamber entrance, crossed her arms thoughtfully. "Well," she said calmly, "looks like they just did." Across the chamber, the symbols shifted again. Then a low, harmonic tone echoed through the structure, deep and resonant, as if the monolith itself had begun speaking. The walls projected a massive holographic interface into the air. A web of symbols formed a rotating sphere above the central platform. Dr. Chin stared at it in amazement. "I think it's waiting." "For what?" Captain Vasquez asked. Chin exhaled slowly. "For another command." Within hours, the discovery sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Every major civilization dispatched fleets toward the Dead Star system. Warships, research vessels, diplomatic cruisers. Thousands of ships began converging on the ancient structure. Meanwhile, inside the monolith chamber, the human research team continued studying the symbols. The interface seemed responsive, but extremely precise. The language wasn't simply words. It was a command structure. Each phrase combined mathematical relationships, conceptual meaning, and emotional context. Dr. Chun spent hours analyzing the symbol sequences. It's like programming, he explained during a live broadcast to the Council's scientific representatives. Except the commands are written in a language that blends logic with intuition. A THRYLL scientist interrupted. Clarify. Programming languages must follow strict, logical syntax. Chun nodded. They do. But this one also relies on contextual interpretation. The alien observers exchanged confused signals. Contextual interpretation is unreliable, another scientist said. Chun smiled slightly. Not for humans. After several days of study, the team was ready to attempt another phrase. This time, the Galactic Council watched the experiment live. Hundreds of representatives filled the massive council chamber, while the human research station appeared as a projection in the center of the room. Dr. Chun stepped toward the monolith's interface. His voice remained calm, though his hands trembled slightly. If our translation is correct, he said, this command should activate a localized transportation system. One of the alien observers reacted instantly. You must not proceed. Architect technology is not fully understood. Captain Vasquez glanced toward the observation camera. Relax, she said. We're scientists, not demolition experts. Chun focused on the symbols again. Then he spoke the phrase. The chamber erupted with light. Across the star system, something massive activated. The sensors aboard the Odyssey Horizon began screaming with alerts. Captain, the navigation officer said urgently. Spatial distortion detected. Outside the station, space itself began to twist. A glowing corridor opened in the darkness, a massive tunnel of energy stretching across the void. Chun stared at the readings in disbelief. That's a wormhole. The navigation officer shook her head. Not just any wormhole. It's stable. A stunned silence filled the bridge. Stable wormholes were one of the rarest and most difficult phenomena in astrophysics. Only the most advanced civilizations had ever created them, and even then only temporarily. But this corridor remained perfectly steady. Dr. Chun checked the destination coordinates. His eyes widened. It connected to a system 8,000 light-years away. The bridge erupted with shocked voices. 8,000 light-years, instantly accessible. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, panic spread among the assembled representatives. The display showing the wormhole corridor filled the air above the platform. This cannot be allowed, the Karth Dominion representative hissed. Another council member spoke urgently. If humans gain control of architect systems, the entire balance of power in the galaxy will collapse. The THRYLL collective transmitted a grim conclusion. The monolith is not a relic. It is a control interface. The implications were terrifying. If the language truly controlled architect technology, then humanity had just unlocked the command system for machines scattered throughout the galaxy. Machines that could manipulate stars, alter planets, or destroy entire civilizations. And they had done it accidentally. Back in the research station, the human crew watched the glowing wormhole with awe. Captain Vasquez broke the silence first. Well, she said softly, that's going to make interstellar travel a lot easier. Dr. Chun rubbed his temples, still trying to process what had happened. This isn't just transportation technology, he said. He gestured toward the monolith. This thing is connected to a network. I'm seeing signals spreading across the galaxy. How big of a network? The captain asked. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. Massive. His display filled with blinking signals as ancient architects' systems awaken one by one. Hidden structures inside asteroid belts. Machines buried beneath dead planets. Dormant constructs orbiting distant stars. All of them responding to the same signal. Captain Vasquez stared at the screen. You're telling me that one sentence just activated a galaxy-wide system? Chen nodded slowly. I think the architect language isn't just communication. He looked back toward the glowing monolith. It's a command code. The room fell silent. Because if that was true, then humanity had just spoken the first command in the most powerful operating system the galaxy had ever known. And somewhere in the depths of the ancient network, something else had noticed. Something that had been waiting for billions of years. Waiting for someone who could finally speak the language. The war for the language. The galaxy had faced many crises over millions of years. Empires had risen and fallen. Stars had exploded. Entire civilizations had vanished into history. Yet never before had the Galactic Council faced a threat quite like the one now emerging in the silent system of the Dead Star. Humanity had done the impossible. They had activated architect technology. And worse still, they appeared capable of controlling it. Inside the massive council chamber orbiting Alindra Prime, tension filled the air like a storm waiting to break. The representatives of the most powerful empires spoke first. This situation is unacceptable, declared the insectoid ambassador of the Karth Dominion. A primitive species cannot be allowed to control systems older than our entire civilization. Across the chamber, the crystalline delegates of the THRYL collective pulsed in agreement. The humans are unpredictable. Their history demonstrates violent conflict and reckless experimentation. Another council member added coldly, if they gained full mastery of architect command syntax, they could dominate the galaxy overnight. Silence spread through the chamber. Everyone understood the implication. For billions of years, architect relics had been treated as sacred mysteries. Even the most advanced civilizations could barely activate fragments of their technology. But humans had already opened a stable wormhole corridor. If they learned more commands, there was no telling what they might unlock next. Finally, the Council reached a grim consensus. Humanity had to be contained. Within days, a massive coalition fleet assembled near the Dead Star system. Warships from dozens of empires filled the darkness of space. Sleek vessels built with technologies refined over millions of years. Their weapons could shatter planets and collapse stars. More than 2,000 ships surrounded the region where the human research station floated beside the ancient monolith network. On the bridge of the Odyssey horizon, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the fleet appear on her tactical display. Well, she muttered, that escalated quickly. Dr. Marcus Chun stood beside her, pale but focused. They're not here to negotiate, he said quietly. A transmission request appeared on the screen. Captain Vasquez sighed. Put them through. The image of the Karth Dominion ambassador appeared in the center of the bridge, a towering insectoid figure whose eyes glowed with cold authority. Human vessel, the ambassador began. You are ordered to immediately surrender all control of the architect structure. Captain Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Order? Yes, the ambassador replied. Your species lacks the maturity to operate such technology. Chen leaned toward the console. With respect, he said calmly, the structure appears to respond specifically to human commands. That is precisely the problem, the ambassador snapped. You will cease all experimentation and allow council specialists to assume control. Vasquez folded her arms. And if we refuse, the alien's mandibles clicked. Then the coalition fleet will secure the artifact by force. The transmission ended. Silence settled across the human bridge. Finally, one of the crew members spoke. They're going to attack. Chen nodded grimly. They think the technology belongs to them. Captain Vasquez stared at the growing fleet outside the viewport. They've spent millions of years believing they're the masters of the galaxy. She turned toward Chen, but the monolith didn't respond to them. Chen looked back toward the glowing symbols in the distance. No, he said softly. It responded to us. The first alien warships moved into firing position an hour later. Across the system, weapons arrays charged with terrifying amounts of energy. Inside the monolith chamber, the human research team worked frantically. Symbols scrolled across the walls as Dr. Chun studied the language faster than ever before. It's more complex than we thought, he muttered. The architect language wasn't just words. It was structured like a layered command hierarchy, each phrase capable of triggering enormous systems across the galaxy. And now they needed one command more than any other: defense. Captain Vasquez entered the chamber. "They're powering weapons," she said. "How long do we have?" "Minutes." Chin took a deep breath. "I think I found something." He pointed toward a sequence of glowing symbols forming a massive phrase across the wall. "If I'm interpreting this correctly," he said, "it activates a system defense protocol." Vasquez glanced toward the observation windows where the alien fleet filled the darkness. "Well," she said, "now would be a good time to test it." Chin stepped forward. Behind him, every alien observer transmitted emergency warnings. "Stop immediately," the Vayari intelligence construct demanded. Unauthorized commands could trigger catastrophic events. Chun hesitated for a moment. Then he spoke the phrase. The effect was immediate. Across the star system, space itself trembled. Asteroids began to split apart as colossal machines unfolded from within them. Structures that had been hidden for billions of years. Gigantic metallic constructs emerged from planetary rings. Ancient satellites awakened from dormant orbits. The Architect Defense Network had been waiting, and now it had received a command. On the bridges of the Coalition warships, alarms screamed. "What is happening?" one alien commander shouted. Sensors filled with thousands of new contacts appearing across the system. Massive autonomous defense platforms surrounded the fleet in seconds. Weapons targeting systems locked onto every hostile ship. Then something even stranger happened. The alien warships suddenly lost power. Across the fleet, engines shut down. Weapons systems deactivated. Navigation controls went dark. The ships drifted helplessly in space. Back inside the monolith chamber, Chun stared at the displays in disbelief. "I didn't expect that." Captain Vasquez smiled faintly. Outside the station, the ancient defense constructs floated like silent guardians around the immobilized armada. For the first time in galactic history, the most powerful fleets ever assembled had been neutralized without a single shot fired. And the species they had come to intimidate, the ones they had called barbarians, had just demonstrated control over technology older than the galaxy's greatest empires. Because the monolith had recognized something the Council never understood. Humans weren't intruders. They were authorized users. And the Architect Network had just acknowledged its new masters. The language of gods. The star system that had once been silent and forgotten was now the center of the galaxy's attention. Thousands of alien warships drifted helplessly in space, their weapons silent and engines dark. Around them floated the massive constructs of the Architect Defense Network, ancient machines that had awakened after billions of years of dormancy. They did not fire. They did not threaten. They simply watched, waiting. Inside the human research station, Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge observing the immobilized Coalition fleet through the massive viewing window. For centuries, the Galactic Council had viewed humanity as reckless newcomers, too emotional, too chaotic, too primitive to be trusted among the ancient civilizations of the stars. Now, those same civilizations were completely powerless, all because one human scientist had spoken a sentence. Behind Vasquez, Dr. Marcus Chun studied the monolith interface displayed on the main console. Streams of symbols flowed across the holographic screen like living equations. "The defense network isn't attacking," he said quietly. "Of course not," Vasquez replied. Chun turned to face her. "You sound certain." She nodded toward the ancient monolith floating outside. "Whatever built that system didn't design it for war." Chun glanced back at the data. "You might be right. The Architect technology had neutralized the entire fleet with surgical precision, disabling weapons, shutting down engines, and locking control systems without causing any damage. It wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of control." Far away in the Galactic Council chamber, panic had turned into stunned silence. Representatives from dozens of powerful civilizations stared at the holographic display of their immobilized fleets. For the first time in their long histories, they had encountered a power they could not challenge. The Karth Dominion ambassador spoke slowly. The humans control the architect network. A T'Char collective representative responded with a flicker of crystalline light. Correction. The network appears to recognize them. That distinction mattered, because if the system had simply been activated, another species might eventually learn to use it. But if it recognized humans specifically, then the entire technological balance of the galaxy had just shifted permanently. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, a quiet voice from the Vare continuum broke the silence. We may have misunderstood the nature of humanity. Back inside the monolith chamber, Dr. Chun discovered something unexpected. Hidden deep within the architect interface was a secondary layer of symbols, far older and more complex than the command sequences they had been using. It appeared to be a message that had remained dormant until the language was spoken correctly. Chen stared at the glowing symbols in disbelief. I think I found something. Captain Vasquez entered the chamber. More commands? Chen shook his head slowly. No. He gestured toward the wall. It's a recording. The human team gathered as Chun began translating the ancient symbols. Unlike the command syntax, this language felt almost conversational. The translation unfolded slowly across the display. At first, the words seemed impossible. Then the meaning became clear. The architects had known their civilization would eventually vanish. They had also known that their technology would remain scattered across the galaxy long after they were gone. So they created a test, a language so complex that only a very specific type of mind could understand it. The translation revealed the truth. The architect language had been intentionally designed to require a balance of abilities. Pure logic alone would fail. Cold calculation would fail. Perfect emotional control would fail. The language demanded something rare, a mind capable of combining logic, creativity, intuition, and emotion simultaneously. The architects had predicted that most advanced civilizations would evolve toward pure rationality, suppressing emotion and unpredictability in pursuit of efficiency. Such minds would never understand the language, because the language itself required imagination. Chen leaned back slowly. They weren't looking for the smartest species, he said quietly. They were looking for the most adaptable one. Captain Vasquez crossed her arms thoughtfully, which explains why none of the ancient civilizations figured out. Chen nodded. They became too logical. Outside the station, the alien fleets remained trapped within the architect defense perimeter. For millions of years, those civilizations had considered themselves the pinnacle of intelligence. But in doing so, they had lost the very traits needed to understand the architects. Meanwhile, humanity, chaotic, emotional, endlessly creative, had exactly the type of thinking the language required. The message reached its final lines. The translation appeared on the wall in glowing symbols. If you are reading this, you have succeeded where others could not. You have understood the language. You are the guardians now. Silence filled the chamber. The weight of the message settled over the human team. The architects hadn't simply created technology. They had created a legacy, a responsibility passed across billions of years to whatever species could prove worthy. Hours later, the Galactic Council received a transmission from the Human Research Station. For the first time since the crisis began, the human representative addressed the entire galaxy. Captain Vasquez stood before the camera. Behind her, the glowing monolith filled the chamber with ancient light. You called us barbarians, she said calmly. Across the council chamber, alien representatives listened in silence. For centuries you believed humanity was too chaotic, too emotional, too unpredictable to belong among the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. She paused. Maybe you were right about one thing. Her gaze hardened slightly. We are unpredictable. She gestured toward the ancient symbols surrounding her. But the architects didn't design this language for perfect machines. They designed it for minds that could think differently. A new command appeared on the monolith display. Outside the station, the immobilized fleets suddenly came back to life. Engines restarted. Weapons systems returned to standby. The defense constructs slowly withdrew into the darkness of the asteroid belt. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed the fleets. Instead, they chose not to. Vasquez looked directly into the camera. The galaxy doesn't need rulers. It needs guardians. The transmission ended, and across the stars, the civilizations that once mocked humanity finally understood the truth. The species they had called barbarians had just inherited the power of gods. Not because they were the most advanced, but because they were the most human.